All right, we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna try to be as this is gonna be a weird one because there isn't like a big hook for this one, guys. But this is about the creator of a show, thank you, called Reservation Dogs, and he does an interview where he talks about stereotypes in the indigenous community, getting the show made, and also his reasoning for why he believes the show got basically not given an Emmy nomination, and that was the part that I took issue with.
All of the headlines about the Emmys, snubs, and whatever people perceived it to be pissed me off because it's like not relevant to the public. Like, who wins Emmys is only relevant to the people who want to get nominated. That's it. No one else pays attention to it. It doesn't boost your show in any way to win an Emmy.
Dude, advertisement agencies are completely the same. Like, it's like top agencies giving themselves awards and they take it so seriously and it's hella lame.
So one thing that I want to point out here before we get started is that I have started watching this show. When I started reading this last night, I thought I'd look into it, and I'd heard good things about it. And the show is actually I've seen like the first episode and like half of the second. It's really, really good. It's actually really, really good. There's strong characterization. There is a distinct personality to each of the main characters. You can tell that the humor is done in a way that means that like it was an all indigenous writers room, and that actually, whereas like normally that would be something we might push back on. I think that a lot of the humor hits because they don't feel worried about. It's not white dudes making jokes that they're worried,
and it's not jokes that have to be funny to literally everybody.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying. A big part of it was in my notes. I put I'm like, is this just a thing where it's like we're trying to appeal to too many people all at once, and that's a problem. Mm-hmm. So I give this guy a lot of credit so far. As far as what I've watched in the show, I'm not super far into it, but the first episode is really, really good. But there's just some stuff in here that that just.
Well, another reason I think that it turned out well is he says he has been given relatively free reign to do with this what he will, like an independent filmmaker would have.
With a larger budget.
Budget.
So basically, the issue for me was I did find it funny how he talks about it. He's like, he didn't feel like the show would be authentic if he didn't get to make it in Oklahoma. Like, your job is literally to make something authentic that's not real. But that's where I'm like when does we're getting to a point now where it's like only gay people can play gay people. Only this can play this. When is it no longer acting and we're just reenacting life experience, right?
And this guy praised the Prey movie. Mm-hmm. So
the praise wasn't very heaping. So I don't know if he's like,
is it like obligatory?
It feels obligatory.
I don't like that you would have to.
I gotta check the Rotten Tomatoes on that.
Why would you be obligated to praise something just because it casted people who are indigenous? Like, so, I don't like that.
Dude, the audience score went down base. I gotta think that was us.
So it's
just us.
Just us.
I'm actually out here like review bombing it every day, like creating fake accounts.
Bots.
So it says, didn't FX want to shoot the show in New Mexico? He says, that was nerve wracking. I couldn't have spent 4 years faking New Mexico for Oklahoma. I wouldn't have been happy. I wouldn't have been proud. It would have been false. I think the authenticity that you feel in the show when you watch it comes from being shot here. That is part of the tone. The specificity is the relationship to this place, and I couldn't fake it anywhere else. I take a little bit of issue with that because I feel like as a showrunner, as a creator, your job is to be able to learn to fake elements of it because it's not like you're telling a 100% true story. But the elements of the story that really struck me as really, really honest was there's a feeling amongst these characters that they're looking for a way out of this place that they feel very hopeless and stuck within. Meaning like where they live, like they're trying to like in the first episode at least they're like robbing places to like save money to get out, but then they also have like the guilt of like leaving people in their community behind and seeing the rest of the struggle. And I do believe, in all honesty, that it comes across as well as it does because he understands that struggle. But I just take a little bit of issue with the idea that he wouldn't have been able to do it anywhere else because it's like when we say, what's the point of a character being exactly like the real life person? When is acting no longer acting? When is it just telling who you are to a screen and just happening to be your story?
Yeah, most things aren't filmed where they're set.
Exactly.
So I don't know why it would have been so important.
Vancouver takes like Vancouver literally stands in for like half of the United States because so much stuff is filmed in Canada. So it says, in highlighting underrepresented communities, you are never going to represent all of it. Have there been gripes? There are people that if they don't see their exact version of representation, that doesn't sit well with them. I'm never going to be able to represent everybody in a way that is satisfying. We are trying to listen to people's concerns. It's a growing, ongoing, organic process to write a show. The best shows don't push anyone's concerns or voices aside. You listen to them and you embrace them. You see what you can do while still making the show that you're making.
Wait. Let's unpack that. The best shows don't what? People's concerns?
He says the best shows don't push anyone's concerns or voices to the side. You listen to them and embrace them and see what you can do while still making the show that you're making. Which sounds like he's saying like, that's too bad, and then just makes the show anyways. But I don't think that's what he means.
The best shows don't give up about your concerns.
Yes.
Do you think
he clearly cares? You know.
Well, I mean, but like, I don't think this is one of the best shows. Respectfully, this ain't Breaking Bad.
I'm picturing. Yeah, if Vince Gilligan, or if the David Simon, the guy who made The Wire, was like started like taking everyone's opinions on what his show should be, or season 1 of True Detective, which was written entirely by one person, which that is a landmark in cinema. That show, that first season of True Detective, is seen as one of a great achievement in that industry because it's a singular person's vision of that story. But they're not worried about story; they're worried about representing groups. I think that in a lot of times, most of the time, the story now comes second. He's just an example of someone who did it well and managed to make the story stand out and do very, very well. Most people don't have his gift. That's where I see the problem with most of it. When everybody else talks about it, it feels hollow. And when he talks about it, because he's successful at it, it actually works. But he talks about...
I get the impression that he is authentically talented, but
yes.
He's also fallen for a lot of the same lies as untalented people have.
Exactly.
So he kind of accidentally did something well.
Yes. Or he did something
fell into making this show good.
Yeah.
In a way.
So it says, when you've been extremely prolific, but this is your first experience working within the Hollywood machine. How did it measure up to your expectations? He says, I have a skewed, not so typical experience with the Hollywood machine because I'm with FX. There's no one telling me how to do this. It's very much a conversation. It feels like I'm an independent filmmaker with a bigger budget. Someone in my position could easily be pushed around because I was just so happy to have a show. That's actually both a huge problem, but also why most of the time Hollywood, when it succeeds, does, because a lot of times the studio's goals are to appeal to as many people as possible. Your goal is to make the show you want to make, and the goal is to find somewhere in the middle to end up, and hopefully you get a wider appeal while also hitting the points that you want to make in the story you're telling. But as we go into representative storytelling and not wider storytelling, which seems to be the focus now, nobody's focusing on making shows for everyone. They're focused on making shows that represent certain groups with the hopes that maybe other people take an interest in it.
Listen, I'm not going to spaz out again about like respecting source material. You guys already heard me like a billion times talked about that. But like, the best shows do have things in common, and like it's typically like A, relatable characters, B, convincing or at least like captivating stories,
and like that are separate completely from representation in the concept of who's playing who.
Sometimes historic pieces, like that's a big part.
Yes.
Right. That it feels and looks like the era or like the moment or whatever. Like I could see, like if I play like Will Smith in a biopic, like I understand why that would be off-putting. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, I mean, although my French Prince is pretty baller, but like beyond that, like we're just constantly not focusing on anything that matters ever in this industry anymore. And like do people not care that the only movies individuals are watching is Marvel movies? Mm-hmm. That the only way to get someone in a movie theater is to have their like Thor and their chicken tendies,
or
like
Top Gun.
The genre is dying, and it's because like you guys are like obsessed about being like the perfect pigmentation and the perfect height and the perfect this and the perfect representation, and you get the perfect looking person that doesn't know S.
Yeah. He also makes some interesting points about like allowing people to laugh.
These last 3 answers
Yeah.
he gave in the interview really annoy me.
The first 2 didn't. It was the third one that bugged me a little bit. Do you want to go ahead and explain the first one? Why that one bugged you? So basically, he talks about that you're in a comedy group called the 1491s, where you said that you learned how to make entertainment for white people. What did that process look like?
He's saying that there's a history of guilt in America, and white people feel so guilty for the past. And in this context, the past of the Native Americans and how they've been treated.
Yeah.
That they are too nervous to laugh with them because they're afraid of seeming like they're laughing at them when they make jokes. And here's why I don't like it. He said they want to be a good ally and listen, and like, I want you to laugh. But you're making it out like it's their fault that they have this perception that they need to shut up and listen.
No, society's done this to them.
Exactly. Like, you can't do anything.
It's the fault of your ilk, though, you know? Like, and you're not exactly redeeming that situation. I get that he wants to have the type of humor that anyone can.
He
let
wants
their
the
guard
mass
down.
appeal. He wants the mass appeal that used to be prevalent in Hollywood, but he doesn't want to let go of the social power that they now control.
Like, decide, do you want people to let their guard down or not?
Yeah.
Because you can't have it all ways.
And the thing is, like, they just want to slap you in the face with representation. And like, my bad for going back to Breaking Bad, but it's the perfect show, and it's a perfect example. If you guys seen the show, in Breaking Bad, Walter White's son is handicapped. And in the beginning, I'm talking episode 1, pilot, beginning, it's obviously used as like a mechanism, like, oh man, like this poor guy, he doesn't make enough money, he's gonna have another kid, and one of his kids is with disabilities, and you're making all the connections, like he probably doesn't make enough money, and like I'm worrying about him, I'm worrying about his health, and all these things. And by like the kid never complains about that at all. He's never like, oh, with people with disabilities. Never, not even once. Like, they make him into a super normal character. And there comes a point at the end where he leaps in the defense of his mother, and that is where that's just a moment where you're like, man, this is like an incredible moment of like representation, because like the person that I'm sure these people would victimize for like forever and ever and ever leaps in the defense of the person he loves the most and becomes like the savior and the hero, and like completely changes the energy of the scene. And it's a super memorable scene from like an iconic show. And like, that is how you do representation. Like, you give these people an arc besides the fact of their like conditions.
Whatever your immutable characteristics are doesn't have to define you.
Yeah, like you're a person outside of that. It's like from Game of Thrones, what's his name? Like Tyrion. Like, most people remember Tyrion for being like quick-witted and brilliant. Like the fact that, you know, like his condition was like minor after a while.
There's I mention a lot of times Meredith Eaton. She's a little person, and she's an actress who's fantastic for her work that has nothing to do with the fact of her condition or of her size. She does great work in spite of that. Like, that's the best part of watching her roles, is that I get lost in what I'm watching and I don't think about it anymore. It doesn't matter because she's just a great actress. So, and the other thing about this was that it reminded me of the last Ricky Gervais special, where he literally has to program people to remind them that these are just jokes. You can laugh. It's fine. Like, we're not telling us we hate people. We're just laughing at humor. You now have to, because society has scared the living crap out of people with propaganda and online harassment and all of these things, where you can no longer tell a joke anymore without getting 1,000 responses from people who are offended. You have to train people to remind them that it is okay to laugh sometimes.
Well, I dislike that we're acknowledging people have this guilt weighing on them that takes their senses of humor away. And then expecting them
to laugh when you
want to.
When they pay to see
laugh
you.
in a compulsory way when you say that it's acceptable.
Yep. And then lastly, this is the one that I wanted to talk about. That this is what made me want to cover this because I had to read it 3 or 4 times.
I hate this. Okay. The last part.
So he says, they say there was certainly an expectation that Reservation Dogs would be a major player at the Emmys. What's your take on the lack of nominations? He says, there's racism out there, right? There's not another explanation for it. But also, I don't care. For me, the show is the award. Nominated or not, the success of the show is obvious. This is a first, a native show like this, so I can't fault them for not nominating us. They probably don't know what to do with this. They know what to do with Martin Short and those guys. Ted Lasso is much easier to see on the Emmy stage, but Reservation Dogs, where does that fit? I wrote the writer's room on a text thread saying it would have been great to be nominated, but it's okay. Don't forget that we made the best show ever. Here's
the pity applause you wanted.
There is a level of intellectual dishonesty there that is insane.
Well, the fact that he is outright saying there's no reason we got snubbed other than racism, but I can't fault them for not nominating us. Like,
this bothered me,
you want to be
dude.
like innocent of like
you
that
can't
unfair
fault them for their
accusation.
racism.
And I also want to point out that, like, obviously a writer's room cares infinitely more about who is nominated for the Emmys than any ordinary person.
He's like, you're all racist, but it's
consuming the entertainment.
Yeah. The show's a reward, because I'm like so morally pious. It's like, do you or don't you care?
It's just faux piety.
And the fact that he literally says there's no other explanation for it.
No other.
If anything, then he's insulting the other stuff that came out that year, saying that, like, oh, that stuff must have been garbage. It must just be because that...
The other stuff which does have, like, major characters that aren't white.
Yeah.
So... I mean,
I also found it funny that
just say that the Emmys are unimportant. But they can't admit that because they're so entrenched in their industry and the sensibilities of
this is on the
the writers' room and entertainers. They actually think that the Emmys are important.
This is the fault of the industry for courting this type of person, for courting this, not for courting this type of dialogue to be held between creatives and the world at large, right? When you reward this behavior and then they don't get rewarded every time, then that becomes a problem that comes back to bite them. So
and it's so ironic because Hollywood has supposedly been ahead of the times for decades.
I also want to point out that all the pictures besides the first one are pictures of awards, so clearly awards do matter to him.
Yeah, and I just hate this trend of people's like, I didn't win the award, gets it's time to shame the Academy for something. Oh, it's because I'm a woman. It's because I'm Latino. Oh, it's because this and that. It's like, maybe you just suck. And like you said, it was commendable, right? So
it's not even that he sucks. Maybe just chalk it up to the fact that the
one
Emmys
person wins
are not... the cultural touchstone that they maybe were before.
One person wins.
This is what I love about this show. It's like I don't consider anything we're saying here a hot take. I consider most of this to be a fair analysis of a good interview for the most part, and then some really bad takes, in my opinion, at the end. And everyone's allowed to have their bad takes. But I just found the last part so unfair to the Academy and to everyone else.
If he were really confident in this project. Our show was great, and it certainly deserved recognition. It didn't get it. That must be because the people who decide on Emmys nominations they are culturally out of touch.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
If they don't know what people actually loved the most.
Imagine taking this to another conclusion. Say you're at the Olympics and it's like scored runs and somebody's like, well, I had the best floor routine in the Olympics. Well, mine was better, but the Olympic judges were clearly culturally biased against me. Like, you could make that same comparison there. There's no way to prove that. There's no way to
the most progressive people
on
you
the
can
planet.
Imagine. Like that on the planet at this current year.
Every article that I looked for, like when I'm reading for stuff for us to talk about every day, it's always about identity. The other article I've been talking about, was about like I literally like covering this just bummed me out because I'm just like, I don't want to freaking talk about this stuff, but I find that statement objectionable and I think it deserves to be talked about. After Batgirl cancellation, She-Hulk cast and creators stressed the importance of studios supporting female-led superhero roles. You lose people the moment you make identity part of this, okay? All you have to say here is that She-Hulk cast and creators stress the importance of new studio projects. Regular people who are not culturally indoctrinated read this stuff and they're like, why does that matter? Why can't you just make something good?
You know what? I agree. Female-led movies are important. So how about we show some diversity in female-led movies, and we have some female-led movies that are not girl boss.
Yeah.
Because we have here like a girl that's not a girl boss, so clearly they exist. You know what I'm saying? So like, how about we have a character in a show that's not a freaking woke activist for once? Like, how about a superhero that's focused on, like, I don't know, doing right instead of like being like constantly nagging and complaining?
We need to just get rid of human characters in movies for like 10 years so that there can't be any of this stuff.
No,
I'm serious.
That's gonna make the portion of furries skyrocket.
I don't care. At this point, I don't care. No human characters in movies for 10 years until they know how to write again.
I think that's why anthropomorphic characters are becoming more common anyway, because they find it easier
it's harder
to sell.
It's harder to write your article about how this is secretly racism when you make this. That's a
I
black
don't think
dog.
Low effort entertainment has to be the answer to,
They'll say it's
around
racism,
but the all these accusations.
Okay, but great art is born out of struggle, right? So the struggle here is to somebody's like, look, I can't get anything approved because everything has to be about race, gender, sexuality, orientation, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to make something that doesn't involve any of those or as few of those as possible. So then you get a bunch of bad ones, but maybe you get one or two that are really, really good. And those end up defining an era of television for a couple of years. It would be nice to see that. I just don't know if people really have that ability.
I have a feeling that She-Hulk is going to get canceled almost
after one season.
Immediately, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Like, as many times.
How many failures will it take?
Dude, you will keep failing with this. Like, the people that represent these values don't have jobs. They can't subscribe.
Yep. Or they're watching it, but they're torrenting it. They're not.
Yeah,
which they're downloading at like Starbucks. Well, because they can't afford Wi-Fi in their house.
And also Starbucks in San Francisco can't legally kick people out.
Exactly. So just that topic itself was a hard one because I felt like that was a very, very good interview where there was a lot of very reasonable answers that was just
He's
finished.
Got the appearance of a reasonable person, but really I think he's a malicious actor. Underneath it.
Maybe
underneath that appearance of being, I don't know.
Maybe I'm less jaded, or not less jaded, but more hopeful. Like your idea is
I think underneath his appearance of being accommodating,
he's malicious.
Yeah.
Whereas I was hoping that maybe he is a decent person who's just been so heavily influenced by the industry he's chosen to be a part of that it's affected certain aspects in a way that he doesn't realize it's doing so.
I would lean more towards that. That's just like the typical response to like have like a petty clap back at the end of everything.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see.
He's just clearly not as confident in the project as he wants us to believe.
Which is sad too, because from what I've seen so far, it's actually quite good. It's got Zahn McClellan in it. It's really, really good. So I'm going to keep watching that this weekend. So I'm going to have to where you have to turn off the brain and I don't care if this guy said a bunch of stupid stuff. It's
separate
fine.
art from the
art from artist. Exactly. Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.